welcome. Today we're going to talk about parenting. Now we have as our guest Linda Clement. She's a longtime parent educator. She used to run a massive Facebook group online before she moved to Vancouver. Currently, she does coaching courses, workshops, and has written several ebooks to help parents thrive in their parenting. She has all these resources available on raisingparents.net. I'm Pearly, the founder of Young Innovators, and it is my pleasure to welcome Linda to our talk today. Hi, Linda. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. I'm good.
Wonderful. Okay, so for me, the whole goal of starting this project was to create a resource for parents. And the theme this week is on parenting. So I did a lot of surveys before creating these questions for our experts. And I know a lot of parents are really eager to know your answers to these questions. So from some submitted parent concerns, the first one is about energy. So these days, because we're all working from home and staying at home more, and with the upcoming school term, there are a lot of parents who actually have to stay at home and homeschool their children. There is a concern that students are not getting enough attention, they're not socializing enough, and then when the parents are stressed out and they're feeling anxious, they're afraid that they're passing it on to their kids. Is there a suggestion that you have about this issue?
Those issues, that's that's a lot. That is definitely a lot of things. One of the suggestions that I often make for people who are spending all of their time at home, especially if they're not used to this, farmers and ranchers have been doing it for a while now. It's a combination of a technique called Pomodoro, which is somebody decided to use a tomato-shaped kitchen timer to time work periods and break periods. So if you think of the time that you have available from when you wake up until when you go to bed, rather than sort of 9 to 3 or 9 to 6, the kind of standard working hours, then if you spread your working periods and break periods over the 15 or 16 hours of the day, you not only get far more done because productivity goes through the roof when you're only working for concentrated periods that fit inside the human brain's ability to concentrate, which is under 40 minutes in most cases. So the Pomodoro technique is to set a timer for 20 or 25 minutes and then take a break for 5 minutes and then 20 or 25 minutes again and a break for 5 minutes. And then after a period of time, like maybe an hour or two of that, you take a much longer break and then go back to 20 minutes on, 5 minutes off, 20 minutes on. Obviously, if the people who are staying at home with you are toddlers, 25 minutes is far too long for them to be on their own in the house without any supervision. So at that point, you would use much shorter periods of time and longer rest periods. But it is possible to arrange your life so that there are more or less 8 hours of work inside that 15 hours without having to sort of figure out what to do with a 6-year-old for 4 hours at a time, because they really genuinely cannot do that. They don't have the ability to do that. And it's not fair to try and make them do that. The other issue you touched on, apparently we have traffic. The other issue that you touched on was about anxiety. And anxiety is a completely different issue from time and energy. It's, first of all, it's draining. It's extremely draining to be anxious. It's based mostly in a fear of the future or worries about the past. So genuinely, the answer to anxiety is to get back in the present moment, to be where you are right now and not worry about whether or not school is going to look different in November, because you don't know. We don't know. We don't know. We are not going to be able to plan that far ahead at this point in time. We also can't worry about what happened in March because it's already happened. And if we spend our day worrying about March, we are not spending our day living today. And anxiety, because it lives in those two different time frames, can be fairly easily and fairly quickly diminished by focusing on what's happening right now. The simplest way, the sort of stock meditation way, is to just pay attention to your breath. Because you can't breathe for next week and you can't keep breathing for last week. You need to breathe for right now. So it's the easiest way to get back to the present moment is just to take a breath, to feel like what that breath feels like in your body, and recenter yourself in this moment right now. And then you can look at what's actually in front of you and say, what is the number one priority right now? Not in 15 minutes, not in 3 years, not in 16 years. Right now, what is the number one priority for my energy at the moment?
Focusing on the present is a good solution. Okay. Well, what about teens or preteens, older children? Is there an effective way to get them off their electronic gadgets? I know a lot of parents are telling me right now that they think their kids are addicted to phone and computer games.
Okay, I'm going to talk about addiction first instead, because we have a lot of armchair psychology and we bandy around lots of diagnostics without really having sufficient information to make those decisions. The fact is, addiction comes from trauma. Addiction is not a result of having a computer around. You don't catch addictions from having a box of cigarettes in the house. Like, it's not what addiction comes from. Addiction is a distraction or a way of handling internal stress that works in the moment. So computer games are super attractive. If your life is very, very stressful and you're not connecting well with the people who you love and need for your survival, and they're not connecting well with you because they don't understand your language or you don't understand their language or whatever the generation gap is causing. In those climates, people reach for distractions. Parents reach for the TV, the wine, the newspaper, the magazine, the endless busyness, the workaholism. They're searching for something to distract themselves from their feelings of disconnection and possibly inadequacy. And just for dealing with the big, powerful emotions that are in their body that they don't know how to deal with. Now, the solution isn't getting rid of the electronics, the shopping, the work, the eating, like whatever it is that people are doing to distract themselves from it. The issue is to handle the problem in the first place. And handling it more effectively is almost entirely, almost always, empathy and compassion. It's forgiving ourselves for our big emotions. It's understanding that our children are having big emotions that they don't know how to handle, that they're expressing immaturely, that they're trying to get away from, because who wouldn't want to get away from endless anxiety or an ongoing sense of not being really welcome in the world? Of course they're reaching for anything that connects them with their friends. Anything that, half the games that the kids are playing endlessly, because there is no natural end or natural break inside the games anymore. Half the games they're playing with their friends. They're interacting with real live people online all the time while they're playing. And so that is their social life right now. It's the only one that's available to them. So the solution to getting them off the games is to give them something that is rewarding, I don't mean rewarding, I mean satisfying. I mean, it meets that need for connection offline. And the idea that people need 100 or 4 people, especially their own age, in order to learn to socialize is really inaccurate. There's no research that suggests that age segregation is healthy, much less necessary for people. Parents often forget that they are socializing their children. Interacting with other people is socializing. You are socializing with your child when you're interacting with them. The urge to not socialize with your child, that go out and play, leave me alone, don't bother me, go deal with your friends, that pushes kids away from what they need and doesn't help anybody, because now we're stuck in the house together with a bunch of people who are used to being pushed away, and we don't have the people around us that we normally get our needs met from. They don't have their friends, we don't have our friends and our coworkers. Now we're looking to each other for what we need, and we can get it there, it works, but we need to understand that that's where we need to get it right now. In addition to, obviously, the phones still work. You can still send your friend a card. It's okay if you have a couple of Zoom meetings a day and all you do is just hang out. You set it up in the kitchen and talk to them while you're doing the dishes. Like, you don't have to be focused on the screen to be socializing with people any more than you have to be in the back seat talking to your kids while you're driving.
Right. If
You
you
can
do
be
it
doing
that
more than
way,
one thing.
then it makes sense. I had a father tell me that for 1 month, he didn't talk to his son, his teenage son, and things just got so awkward. And this was a father who was clearly a very good father. He loved his son, but just that way of communication between them, something was missing. And of course, he had all of his emotions during the pandemic and the stress too from everything that he was going through. So it really affected the relationship until he finally realized that he was doing a lot of harm, and it might have negative effects well into the future for when his son's a dad. And he told me the whole story of how once he realized that, and that he needed to communicate more with his son and to show more empathy, things changed. And then slowly his son started opening his door again, and then the relationship completely just warmed up.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I always say to parents, the first thing you need to do is pay attention, and the second thing you need to do is listen. Or maybe the other way around. Watch what's actually happening. Watch your kids' eyes. Like, you don't need to do the same thing as them. If you think playing pretend games with a pile of Bionicles is the boringest thing you could possibly do in your life, don't force it, because nobody in the world wants to play with a martyr. That's not enough fun. That martyrs smell bad. Don't let one of them be in your house. But you need to be with your kid while they're doing what they want to do. And by with them, I mean watching them, noticing what they're doing, seeing how they connect with their stuff or how they're interacting with the world. Watch their eyes so that you can see kind of what they're thinking and kind of what they're focusing on. And you can talk about it with them. You can say, oh, I see you were playing whatever with your whichever kind of toy. I was watching you, looking at it and seeing you thinking through what it was you were going to do with that puzzle piece or whatever. I could see you doing that. And that's really validating. More than anything else, people want to feel seen. They want to feel understood. They don't need somebody else to play the way they want to play. And quite often that's what a 3-year-old wants, is to, make the dolls do what they want, including the dolls that are adults. They want all the dolls in their world to do what they want them to do, even the ones that move around and talk on their own, because they don't really understand people or people yet. But sit down beside your kid while they're playing video games. If you're concerned about what's going on in the video game world, don't stand across the room saying, oh, video games are terrible. Get closer. Find out what it is your kid likes about this video game, what they find rewarding, what quest they're working on. You don't need to play it, although I find often parents do. When they get involved in it, they do start playing Minecraft. The second largest cohort of people playing Minecraft after the 9 to 12-year-old group is the 30 to 40-year-old group, because their parents get interested in it with them. And then they're playing it side by side. The benefit of that, because it's also a live chat game, is that you can be there when the predator makes some inappropriate comment from some profile that says that they're 9. You are there watching what your kid is seeing, and then you have those wonderful opportunities for those conversations that everybody has such a hard time bringing up, like people online are not necessarily real, and some people want things from children that are really inappropriate. Those conversations are hard to come up with when you're behind a newspaper and they're playing on a tablet. It's much easier when the conversation comes up organically in the middle of what it is that you're sharing, doing together.
Yes, and you're right beside them. Well, these days though, what if parents themselves, they're also just feeling worn out and as was told to be, anxious and stressed and a little bit depressed. So, they don't have that room to necessarily spend all that time with their kids enjoying their video games or computer games. What can they do to minimize the effects of the dangers of online, first of all, and then the effects of isolating at home?
I think you can't really emphasize enough that you can't supervise by remote control. The fact is, parenting takes up a lot of time. It takes time and energy and focus and attention, and that's the reality. That's the nature of the job. That's the way parenting is. Until your kids are capable and old enough to understand the risks and supervise themselves, they need supervision. And you can't sort of say, here's the 6 rules that'll stop me from having to spend any time doing that. It's more a matter of understanding that you need to pace your day and take care of your physical needs. We've kind of grown up into a culture that pretends we don't have any. We're all sort of from here up. And, you know, everything is cerebral and everything is, you know, partly getting what we want. We have this hilarious idea that if we get everything we want, we'll be happy. It doesn't work that way, and it never has. And you'd think there's enough evidence in North America now to prove that no matter how much stuff you have, you can still be anxious, depressed, and overwhelmed in a house, you know, full of the things that you chose that you want. And now all of your day is in your control. And apparently that's not enough to make people happy. It's a great way to make them overwhelmed. The first thing is to make sure your physical needs are met, because you cannot be mentally well balanced and emotionally mature when you are depleted, because you can't. If you're exhausted, you are not going to be the best you can be. If you're unfed, you are not going, I mean, you're going to be hangry. All those hilarious commercials about how you turn into this grumpy old monster, those are real. We need to take care of our physical bodies. We need to get fresh air and exercise. We need to rest. And because this day is now 15 or 16 hours of on all the time, because we don't get to go to the nail salon and do that thing, or, you know, we don't get to go to the pub after work for beers with whoever's around and just zone out, because we don't get to do that anymore. We need to put those relief moments into our lives. Years and years ago, I wrote an article. It's available in the article reprints on my website. It's called, "Can I Go to Club Med, Please?" And it was based back then on the idea that the solution for being overworked, overwhelmed, overprogrammed, and overtaxed for a year is to go on a 2-week vacation. Now, we're kind of in the sort of microcosm of the same thing. Now we have every day overworked, overtaxed, overprogrammed, over pressure, overwhelmed. You know, the school is saying things like the kids are going to have to be in front of the Zoom meeting for 6 hours a day. That requires an enormous amount of pushback from parents, because that is not healthy. That is not a good idea, and it is not conducive to learning. That is not how you get kids to learn online. It doesn't work. So parents need to say, actually, they're not going to be there. Click and turn it off for a little while. We're going to have a rest now. So in that article, I talked about how the hangover effect from 2-week vacation is about 36 hours, which is to say, when you get back and you finished unpacking and racing back to work, you feel relaxed for maybe some part of 3 days before you're right back to the stress level that you had before, which suggests this is not a good way of relaxing and rejuvenating a human body. So in it, I recommend, especially on very busy days, especially on very hard days, to take anything from 20 seconds to 5 minutes, every 20 minutes to an hour, all day long, to regenerate your energy levels. And that means put your feet up and stop answering whatever. Just say, I'm taking a break, I'm not dealing with it now. Stare out the window. In the article, there's actually a whole bunch of silly ideas. Pounding nails into a board, writing a poem, talking to a friend for 2 minutes, you know, just calling up and saying, oh, and then hanging up. It's fine. There's all kinds of things that you can do in very short periods of time. And when you do them regularly throughout the day, you don't ever get to the point where you need all of Saturday afternoon off, because you never get so depleted that it's 4 hours or 3 days or 2 weeks that you need. And that's about managing your energy more effectively, which is the other thing that Pomodoro technique does, is actually focus you on the pattern of, I can pay attention and I'm losing my focus and now I need to rest and now I can pay attention again. That sort of waving pattern of real life. You know, I'm fed, so I'm full, and then I get hungrier and hungrier and hungrier, so I need to eat again, so I'm like that, only with energy.
Yes, you mentioned before when we were discussing self-care for busy moms that it's important to choose their battles wisely. There was one mom who mentioned that she has zero time for self-care because she has 3 children under the age of 12, always demanding attention. But, if she doesn't create that room in herself to be relaxed and to be the best parent that she could possibly be, then she won't be able to give them all of her undivided attention when they ask for it.
Well, and the issue of that sort of insatiable need is, in my opinion, not about attention. It's about a sense of safety. And especially now, the kids, we're watching more news with our kids in our house than they have ever seen in their lives. The advice from experts is changing every week. And that's because they get more information, and the information changes the advice. But it's very stressful because it's ongoing, endless change, and change unsettles people. They don't feel safe and secure in an upheaval environment. In happiness research, one of the things that they have found is that cultures that are rigid and autocratic have actually happier people than cultures that are chaotic. Like the sort of chaos of we're currently in the middle of a civil war or something, that's actually worse for people than being under a dictator. In terms of how mentally, because the predictability of the day is one of the things that makes us feel more safe, more stable, and more safe. So instead of trying to meet their needs for attention, which in my opinion is impossible, because that's not the pressing need, it's almost like there's sort of a hierarchy of needs. And this isn't Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's kind of based on William Glasser's work in choice theory. If the first thing you need to be healthy and stable is a sense of security and stability, and you concede that you're never going to get that, then you go to the next one, which is love and a sense of belonging. That's the child who's like, I am never going to get enough attention out of you because I don't feel safe, and this need doesn't meet it. So when they give up on love and belonging, they go to power, and that's when they start ordering everybody in the house around. And then they go to freedom. And freedom is dangerous. It's when they, leave the house at 2 o'clock in the morning or whatever. And then the really, really dangerous one, when they're not feeling secure and they go all the way down the list to fun, that's when they light the neighbor's house on fire. So my recommendation is always to go back and see what it is that is making this child feel unsafe. And it could be because you're feeling very shouty lately and your reactions are unpredictable and high key, and that's terrifying to live with for little kids. And maybe work on not doing that quite so much, or repairing the relationship more intentionally after you have. It's like, I had a spaz because I was being angry in me, and it didn't have anything to do with you, although I get it. It was frightening for you. That sort of repairing the sense of safety and connectedness, instead of trying to constantly meet that need for attention, because if it's not the real need, there is no way of meeting it. It's like trying to give kids enough toys to make up for them feeling abandoned. What toy will make you not feel abandoned? That's not possible. So you need to meet the need for connection and a sense of physical safety, a sense of psychological safety, rather than trying to meet the endless need for attention. And then you'll have time to go have a shower because they'll feel safe. There's a couple of things that really, really help to make people feel safe, and they're funny physical things. The picnic underneath the kitchen table with a blanket around it, that environment feels safe, especially if the table is up against a wall so that the sides are soft, the ceiling is low, and the back is stable. Some kids find a sort of a nest in a closet, especially at the end of a long hallway. Feels really safe and secure. Low lighting, soft music, a complete lack of people shouting around them. Physical safety, obviously, if they're butting heads a lot, if the kids are beating each other up a lot, they need to be separated because nobody can feel safe when they're about to be attacked at any moment. And it's not different for a child to be attacked by their younger sibling than it is for them to be attacked by a stranger. Like, that doesn't feel safe. So when that lack of safety is in the house, that needs to be stopped. And I think, you know, a great deal of mental energy and planning needs to go into stopping children from attacking each other. I don't think that kind of sibling rivalry is normal at all, and I don't think it should be allowed.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is a good thing for parents to have that kind of leadership. What about having a routine at home too? That will cause a sense of safety, right?
In the absence of emotional connection and safety, routine can take the place, because anything that's more predictable than something that's less predictable will help. But installing a secure or a schedule for the sake of having a schedule doesn't make people feel safe. It's not better than, like, there's nothing better about eating when you're not hungry than not eating when you're not hungry in terms of meeting needs and making people feel safe. What mostly works the best is getting your needs met. So when you're tired, you should sleep. And when you're not tired, you should not be told to sleep or asked to sleep. And if you're not hungry, you should not be forced or pressured to eat, because that doesn't feel safe. That's nothing to do with me taking care of me. That's to do with the clock or some other expert or somebody who's decided that I'm supposed to be hungry right now when I'm not. And that doesn't add to safety. Predictability does. So knowing that after we eat, we go out into the yard and play for a while, and then we go back in and read books or do something quiet for a while, and then we eat again. That can help, just because sort of a loose routine of, you know, and then next we'll do, might help. But deciding that, you know, between 6 and 9 we're going to do this, and between 9 and 11 we're going to do this and do this, that's just rigidity, and that doesn't really meet people's needs either. Okay. Because people's needs change every day.
Yes. So it is important to learn how to identify and meet the internal needs that's causing the attention-seeking behavior, or that's causing what is making the child feel a little bit, you know, unsafe or empty in the first place. So yeah, it's important for parents to find out the cause and meet whatever need it is that their child has. Okay.
And I find generally that because our brain is programmed this way, it's a big part of our survival. We are programmed to be afraid and to see the negative. So instead of trying to figure out whether it's attention or feeling loved or getting enough eye contact or playing enough Barbies with mom, if you go directly back to the security issue all the time, basic needs, feed, water, sleep, exercise, fresh air, if you go all the way back to the first one every time, then it sort of has a real trickle-down effect. Once you're feeling safe, everything else is easier. If you're not feeling safe, everything else is harder.
Right. There's a question from parents about how their children, well, their teenager and 10-year-old, are more argumentative these days due to all the interaction and time at home. So what is a better way for them to communicate with their two argumentative children at this time?
I'll tell you a story. I taught my mom not to pick every battle that's an opportunity. You can decline an invitation to an argument anytime you like. The fact that somebody says something outrageous or inflammatory or filled with attitude or sass doesn't mean you need to react to it. You don't have to. This is not the only moment you will have an opportunity to explain something, to defend yourself, to correct their position or whatever. I had the dumbest argument in my lifetime with a 2.5-year-old who was convinced that Aerosmith were girls because they had long hair. Now, I participated in that argument. Why would I do that? First of all, whether or not she believes they're girls doesn't change whether or not they're girls. So I don't need to fix that. That's not going to alter the universe. She grew out of it, so I didn't need to correct it then in the first place. And I don't need to use my mental energy to argue with a completely ridiculous position. I don't need to do that. So I taught my mom, actually, she told me that I taught her not to argue about everything because I would personally argue about everything, apparently including with a 2.5-year-old about whether or not Aerosmith are girls. So pick your battles, genuinely. Just because some teenager says "Ah, bah, 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 bah," at your head doesn't mean you have to "bah, bah, 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 bah," back at them. You can go, I heard you. You're concerned about this. You believe that. This is important to you. And not, you don't need to be reactive. It can help a lot if you practice that breathing thing that we talked about earlier, that whole, you can only take one breath at a time. And if you focus on your breath and this moment, you'll give your body an opportunity to calm down. Because if your natural reaction is you need to a little bit first, but you can choose not to participate in any argument. You do not have to correct the world, and you don't have to fix this right now. They'll figure it out in time. Eventually, when they're less argumentative, maybe you can give them some information. You don't need to deal with it in the moment every single time it comes up.
I like this. Decline the invitation. It takes two to participate. Well, Linda, would you have any tips or strategies on a mindset shift for parents? So everyone's feeling so anxious and stressed out these days. What are some other ways that they can shift their mindset to help keep their kids safe and healthy and well?
I think more than anything, it would be a really good idea to stop broadcasting the news in your house. News is not noted for its happiness and sense of safety that's attached to it. It tends to be extreme, and sometimes they have to go a very long way to get the terrible news that obviously sells ad space. It's important to stay in the real moment. And that's, back to the sort of first point, is be present right now. Because usually all that sort of, I'm worried about all the things. I'm worried about my retirement savings, my job next week, the possibility that I'll never see my parents again because they're older and somewhere else. Like all that stuff, that's not right now. You can't do anything about any of that right now. So as soon as you get back to right now, the question is, am I hungry? Am I tired? Do I need to exercise? Should I go outside? Do I need a hug? Right now. Because you can't do tomorrow yet. There's that AA thing, one day at a time. And every time I hear it, I think, I can't do more than one breath at a time. I don't have a day available to me right now. I can't do a day. I can do now. I can't do 24 hours at a time. I don't have the ability. That's like walking from Vancouver to Detroit in one step. You can't do that. There's more between here and there. So if we focus instead on every moment rather than what am I going to do this week? It's like, no, what am I going to do right now? And when your priorities are really clear, like kids' emergencies are first, mom's health is second, because, it would be nice for mom to be healthy and the kids to be dead, but let's go with it. If there's an actual emergency, you deal with that no matter what else you need. If there isn't an emergency, you take care of your own physical health first. And that includes your mental health because your body has your brain in it. It's part of it. And you cannot have good, stable mental health in an unhealthy body, especially not when it's unhealthy because it isn't getting enough rest and it isn't getting enough food and it isn't getting enough exercise. If you're chronically ill, that's a completely other, that's not what I mean. I don't mean you can't be mentally healthy when you have an illness. I mean, you can't be mentally healthy when you're depleted, because the first thing that's depleted is your brain resources. So stay fed, stay watered, stay exercised, stay hugged and touched. Human touch is a basic human need. We need to touch other people. And it's actually that whole, desert of affection is really dangerous to the elderly in places like care homes because they just don't get touched. So making sure that you're sitting on the couch all piled on top of each other for some of the day, because everybody needs that touch, including you, even if you're feeling like, I've got all this other stuff to do. You may have all that other stuff to do. The laundry may need to be folded and put away, but the laundry doesn't need a hug, and you do. So sometimes we need to lean into that discomfort of being touched too much, because what we really are trying to do is all the other things. I think because we've sort of come to the idea that being touched is a reward for having worked enough. And we need to start with the idea that you start the day rested because you slept last night, and you start the day fed because breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Start the day with the touch and affection that you need in your life. And then everything gets easier through the rest of the day. And be aware of your energy levels. That when your energy levels are crashing is the most likely time that you're not only going to be grumpy, but that you're going to be negative. You're going to feel bleak about your life. And that's not a position of gratitude, or even a very accurate one. You know, we're sitting here talking on Zoom in a world where there are people who are starving to death because there is not enough food. And it's almost like our brains are used to the idea that we have to have adversity around us, so we create it when it doesn't really exist. Because if the worst thing that ever happens in somebody's life is that they're in lockdown for 2 years because of a quarantine, and they can talk to their friends online and on the phone, and they can still get their mail and all their groceries can be delivered, not really a hardship, actually, when you think about it. I actually think in 5 or 7 years, what's going to be going around on Facebook in your memories from 5 years ago is going to be, actually, that was a really interesting time, and I'm glad I lived through it.
Yes, I talk about this all the time about the gifts of the pandemic. You know, never have we actually had all this time to stay at home with our family members, or time to do what our passions are, to follow up with things. So I do see all the gifts of this pandemic, of course.
Well, and even having the time to find out what our gifts are. Because everybody, there are people who are my age and a little bit younger who literally hit the ground running when they were 3 or 5 and were doing all the things. They went to school all winter long. They went to summer camps all summer long. They went to classes all evening. They went to sports all weekend, and they've been doing it since. And now they're standing around with all of that stuff peeled off. And they're facing themselves for the first time. They have no idea what they like to do.
Wow.
Because they've never had 3 days straight when they weren't, you know, oh, I have to get on that tour bus, and oh, I need to go see that museum show. And even their vacations have always been, and here they are now suddenly stuck in their own homes in perfect safety, having a great deal of difficulty dealing with the fact that they have absolutely no idea what it is they like to do, what's important to them, or how to find out what it is.
Yes, so this is really a great opportunity for not just parents, but for everyone to take the time and pursue their own development, of course.
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely. Well, and we have the opportunity, and we need to take and make the opportunity to connect with other people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Zoom has made it possible, and obviously Zoom's not the only thing, but here we are talking on Zoom again. Zoom has made it possible to have this kind of face-to-face conversation and interaction and laugh with people who are not just in the next apartment building, but in the next country over. I've been socializing with people in India. You have any idea how much it costs to call India? I'm not just going to call somebody up and say, well, hey, do you want to chat for a little while? Like, nobody does that, especially not with somebody they barely know. But I've been talking to people in California, in Toronto, in India, in England, in New Zealand. That's not a normal way to, and it's been fantastic getting different perspectives on the pandemic, getting different perspectives on what it's like in where they are, and how different the sort of guidelines and what the public reactions have been. It's been really interesting and a wonderful opportunity. When I was a kid, I'd have to wait for a documentary to be made about that.
Yes. I recently had an old travel buddy reach out to me we met when I was backpacking in Australia almost a decade ago, and you know, the pandemic gave her a chance to reconnect with all of her lost contacts, and it was great. She was thriving with a new business in Germany, and we just talked for a long time on all of the things that we have done since then.
Yeah, My kids actually, every time somebody says, oh, social media is a waste of time, and those kids aren't talking about anything anyways, they just sit around making dumb noises. Well, they would be doing that if they were at a playground, so, you know, whatever. But my kids are the ICQ era. They're you know, bordering on 30 something. And they started out going to summer camps in their teens. And as far as I know, they not only are still in contact with everybody they went to summer camp with every year, but also with everybody they've ever worked or lived with.
Wow.
That's what social media has done for my kids' lives. So they don't necessarily, you know, have in-depth conversations for a whole weekend with a bunch of them, but they know what's going on in each other's lives. And they know who each other is. They know how they react to things, from the news to odd food. Like, they know all these people. And I think, I don't know half of the people that I went to kindergarten with, much less.
That is the power of social media and technology. It's enabling us to keep our connections for longer, through greater distance, and over time.
Yeah. And for us to literally have a village of people, so that when somebody says, and I actually know somebody who did this, somebody who was traveling, I don't remember where, Spain or somewhere, who posted to social media and said, we're stuck because of COVID and we can't afford a hotel room. So what are we going to do? And somebody else said, oh, my parents are stuck here. You can use their house.
Wow.
And it was somebody that they had kind of known from a long time ago because of a choir or something. But because they were still in contact, it was literally one post and they had somewhere free to stay.
Yeah, technology is really great, despite all the differences that it's causing right now in education. So I recently wrote a guide for parents, the top 10 tips for homeschooling. I know you have a lot of thoughts on how the media right now is swirling with getting kids back to school, or maybe not, or, you know, about backsliding into school breaks. So what are your thoughts on helping students learn through this unusual time, Linda?
Well, first of all, they're learning all the time, so, you know, get out of the way. It's what our brains do. The idea that kids need to go to school to learn how to learn is, I don't even know who invented that idea, but that was never accurate. It's never been true. It might be the only environment in their world where there are the resources to learn, but, you know, public libraries and the internet say otherwise. Both my kids, full disclosure, both my kids never went to school until they went to college. And I was in a unique position when I went to school, which annoyed me enormously for a very long time. I didn't get to skip a grade because it was pointless. So instead of saying, oh, you've already finished all this, maybe you can come back and join us when we catch up to you, we'll just bore you to death for the next 8 years. Don't worry. So, and because I was in the original BC Teachers Federation long strike, the 3-month strike when I was in grade 2 or 3, we used to go back into the school, pick up our work in our coats in the middle of the winter, and go home with the work. And it never, ever took 20 minutes to finish. And we did not backslide. We didn't have to catch up. We were right on track. So there's 20 minutes of the 6-hour day. What else are they doing? The fact is, in most classrooms, most of the time, what kids are doing is listening to another kid get in trouble, listening to directions that they heard yesterday, having somebody else have it repeated again, going over the same material they went over last week. There's an enormous amount of just, it takes a long time to handle 30 people in the room that nobody needs to replicate now that there aren't 30 people in the room. One of the things that came up just the other day, somebody was talking about the problem with kids on Zoom. And they said, you know, kids are not used to watching the reaction of 30 kids in their classroom. And that's true. They're not the ones facing the class. They're looking forward. And that's a problem with Zoom. And I thought, well, you're obviously not very familiar with Zoom because I currently have this set. So I can only see your face. And that's always an option. So you could set it up so the only thing the kid can see is the teacher's face, and the teacher can see all the kids like usual. And that solves that problem. The other problem is, the fact is, there's a great deal of your head is down and you're doing something at your desk during the day. And teachers don't need to look at that. They don't need to see the top of the kids' heads while they're doing something. So that I think the format would work better if it was at the top of the hour, you log on, we go through the assignment for this hour. Maybe the last 15 minutes of it, we'll talk about that, you know, your results or what you got, or you'll show it to the screen or whatever. And then, or submit it to my email and I'll read it over and give you feedback. And at the top of the hour, we'll do it again. Because that, you know, as the subject changes, we'll get to the next thing. I'll tell you what to do. And if you have any questions, pop onto Zoom. I'll be here and you can ask me. And then we're not all sitting here with nothing to do most of the 30 minutes or hour-long class.
Right.
I think it would be a much more sensible way of using the technology.
Yeah.
I also know, because I'm involved with a bunch of Facebook groups for homeschoolers, that they're adding people to their lists in the hundreds a day right now.
Yes, yes.
Apparently, only about 80% of BC parents surveyed are actually going to be going back to school, and the rest of them are just going to go with the homeschooling option, which I think is great because it makes the social distancing much easier in the school.
Absolutely. And in some other areas, like down in the States, I know that the different counties have committed to homeschooling for the whole year. So parents are expected to keep their kids home and help them with their schoolwork that way.
Yeah. Well, and as a longtime homeschooler, I can tell you it doesn't take 2 hours a day. You don't need to do this for 2 hours a day. You do not need to spend the time that it takes to manage 30 kids when you only have 5 or 7. It doesn't take that long. You can sit them down first thing in the morning if they have the energy, or, you know, after they've run around for a little while so that they're in a sit down mood, and let them work on whatever it is they're interested in from this week's package. And trust that they're learning all the time. They learn things doing everything.
They really are. Let's wrap it up here. Linda, do you have any other thoughts on the topics that we've covered today? Any last words for parents?
I have a shameless self-promotion. I have a parenting course coming up.
Oh, okay. What's it about?
It's called Reconnect, 8 Weeks to Influential Parenting, because one of the things that has happened in this pandemic is that people have discovered sometimes right in their face, like that dad you were talking about, that they're not connected to their kids, which means they can't influence them. And you can't influence them in any direction if you're not connected. You know, even if you would be a terrible influence on your kids' lives, yeah. I don't know that that's a thing, but even if you were a terrible influence, you will not be an influence if you can't connect to them. So it's an 8-week program. It gets fairly intensive. It's probably 4 or 5 hours a week of work. There's an hour-long live segment of it every week. And it's delving into what it takes to connect, what it takes to reconnect, and why it is that we're unconnected. Like what has disconnected us and what to look for later as you're trying to build and maintain and possibly rebuild the connection with your kids.
Well, it sounds wonderful. How many spots do you have available if parents want to sign up?
I have only 15 spots in 2 different time frames. I decided to open it up to the world. So it's 7 p.m. our time, Pacific time in North America, and on Thursdays from September 24th until November 12th. And it is also at 11 a.m. Pacific North America time. Because that kind of opens it up to being a reasonable time of day for most of Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand, and Europe. One or the other of them will work for people all over the world.
All right, thanks for sharing that with us. So let's wrap up what Linda talked about today. Linda did discuss with us the different ways that we can recharge ourselves, whether it's taking a few minutes on the hour and then, or even 5 minutes or 20 minutes to recharge and to be there for our children, as well as figuring out what the needs are of our child first before we address anything else. She also talked about how important communication is, and that is at the forefront of the whole family dynamic. Right now, social isolation is a concern, and virtual connections might not always be safe. So, what is the best thing for a parent to do? You do really need to take that time to be interested in what your children are doing, whether it is playing a computer game or TikTok or other social media avenues that they're getting into, and be beside them, actually participate with them so that you can tell them what it is you like or don't like about these social media outlets, ways for them to spend their time. Linda also mentioned about having the ability to find your inner balance first, and providing that sense of safety for your children, because at the core of it, communication and safety, those are things that as a parent you really do have to focus on, and you really should prioritize as well so that you can keep your kids healthy and safe. And then finally, Linda had a lot of thoughts on online learning and homeschooling. There are different resources that you can use, especially now in this era of homeschooling. And Linda also shared with us an opportunity to enroll in her upcoming course for parents to help parents close the generational gap. Linda, what are 3 fun and easy challenges that you would like our parent listeners to participate in this week to boost their parenting related to some of the topics that we've covered so far?
All right. I think the first one is to try and break up your day more intentionally into work and rest periods. And by work, I mean everything, including cooking and laundry and like all the things that are work, because they're not rest. Unless you particularly enjoy cooking and find it, your Zen moment. To break up your time intentionally using a timer like a Pomodoro app or a kitchen timer for a few hours a day for a week. Just see how it works for you and see if it makes a difference to both your productivity and how stressful you feel towards the end of the day. The second one is try to answer an invitation to the argument with pure listening and empathy once a day for a week. Instead of explaining, justifying, arguing, or defending yourself, understand first what it is that the person who has invited you to the argument is trying to tell you and what they mean underneath it with their emotions. Using the sort of standard nonviolent communication format of you feel some emotion word like enraged or grief-stricken, or kids never feel small things, they only ever feel big things. Because something happened when you needed to feel safe or to feel loved or to have your own personal power. If you try answering the invitation to an argument with pure listening once a day, see what happens in a week. The third one is try a self-calming tool. Focus on your breathing, stare outside at a tree, meditate for a minute, use a Calm or a Headspace app for at least 4 times a day, just for 1 to 2 minutes at a time. Set a timer, put it on your calendar, put a little dot around the room, do it every time you go to the washroom, just for 1 to 2 minutes 4 or 5 times a day for a week, and see what difference it makes to your energy and your stress level.
Those are doable. All right. So thank you so much, Linda, for your time today and for sharing your thoughts and expertise on parenting for our parents.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, so parents this week, hopefully you have a boost in your parenting. Please share with us what works and what doesn't for you. We would love to hear your feedback, so make sure you do post in our group. Bye, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day.